Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of our video on the Airbus A380, the fly-by-wire alpha version here. Today, of course, we're going to be trying putting this huge airplane down on the ground, and I just can't get over how huge the tail is on this thing. It's mind-bogglingly big, and it should be a pretty fun time. Let's get started. So first things first, if you've been following along with the other two videos, you probably have a pretty good idea of everything that we've done so far. We've gone through our systems checks, we've done a little navigation, we've done some cruising, we've walked you through a little bit of the FMS and the autopilot. Now it's simply going to be a matter of getting this thing down on the ground. And that's kind of the interesting thing. Now, the first thing you'll notice over here on my left is the fact that we have thrust idle right now. And if I turn my head, you'll notice that we're in the climb position. Now, remember that the levers here are for thrust, or they're not for the actual opening or closing valves or anything like that. So basically, I'm saying I need this thrust selected, but the engines, of course, because they're an auto thrust, have set me to idle actual stuff coming out the back of the engine, so to speak. We're currently in a regular descent here. We selected descent by dialing in our altitude and pushing the up button right here. And we can actually monitor the descent. I'm going to clean this off a little bit, make this easier to see here. You can see there's our speed selection. It kind of gives us a little bit of a range to work from. And you can also see our current altitude constraint of 3,000 feet chilling here. And of course, you can see we're happily going down, and our little green arrow says we're basically right where we need to be. The little mock light just came on, giving us a heads up saying we're basically getting ready to go. So let's swing over to our checklist real quickly here. Departure change, we got our approach. A couple different things we need to do is make sure our barometric reference is set, seat belts, make sure our minimums are set, make sure our auto brake is set, and all those components are good to go. So we're going to be taking the ILS 28 right today. And the reason I know that, of course, if you saw our first video, is we actually pre-programmed that in there, and you can actually see where that is. Now, if I press the dest page real quickly, you can see where we're currently selected. If I click on this one, I can actually come over here and hit arrival, and I can change any of these items. Now, one of the things I really like here is you'll notice the fact that it makes a note of the ILS frequency of 111.70. The reason we need that, I'm going to go ahead and escape here, we can clear that info, we don't need it, is when we come down here to our actual page to navigate, you'll see that that has actually been pre-selected inside of the computer. Now, if we didn't hit that, of course, that would give us some interesting problems, because basically we'd be on the wrong ILS, or you'd be kind of landing at the wrong altitudes and things along those lines. But if we need to manually do it, you can actually come over here and basically pick it if you needed to. You kind of, again, pick a specific one. You can see the current ones that are already selected. We have a TACAN in there, we have an ILS in there. Everything is pretty much ready to go if you had to actually come in here and start manually overriding the settings. One thing we do need to do, though, is we need to get our performance all kind of pre-selected and ready to go for our landing. So if I come up here to my active, I can come down to my perf page. You can see our currently selected mode is descent, but of course we're going to be interested in approach. So when you hit the approach page, it's going to give you a bunch of recommendations. You can actually dial in the wind right here. And one of the things I like is if you actually would come over here and hit your handy dandy button right here, this one at the top, here we go. I can actually get KSFO, press enter, and I can see 280 at 10 knots. So you can actually come in here and dial that in. So 280, enter. And we're going to do 10 knots, just like that. Outside air temperature, we can confirm that for ourselves. It's 12, dew point 11. It's cold in San Francisco today. Holy smokes. And of course, if we wanted to confirm that as well, 3008 is going to be our QNH as well. 3008, enter, delightful. And you can see that's preset. We can also dial in our minimums. It's a good time to go take a look at the actual minimums ourselves. Let's go ahead and do it together. Coming in here right now, let's see here. We have 21318. Oh my goodness, is that a minimum? Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. That's impressive. All right, let's go ahead and dial that in here. Barometric, we're going to do a radio altimeter of 200 feet. It's good to go. You can see every time I press the enter key, unfortunately, I'm using the one in the numpad, so it keeps kicking my rudder a little bit. That's why it does that. Now, of course, that's all set to go. Configuration is going to be full. Our stall speed is going to be 128. Our approach speed is going to be 138. If we needed to override this, we could come in here and do that. But one of the things you'll notice here is my VREF and my VApp has already kind of got all that stuff sort of pre-calculated in it. So my VApp is actually completely accurate. That is for sure exactly what I would like to use for my approach speed for this aircraft, 138. Again, even though we're a gigantic airplane, it does not mean that we're going to struggle basically getting the thing down to the ground. So I'm not going to stress about that too much for that particular purpose. So this is good to go. We've got all the performance things kind of set up. We've got our navigation radio set up. Those components are ready to go. Let's bring it back to our checklist real quick. Let's see here, barrel ref, we're going to deal with that when we get closer. Seatbelts are on, minimums are set, auto brake, we need to set that as well. So the automatic brake, pretty easy as far as that goes, so we can just come in here and dial it in. One of the cool things is we can actually select on this aircraft what particular taxiway we want to get off. For now, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to leave it on basically setting 3. I'm not going to fiddle with any of those other things because of the fact that we have a relatively easy time today for those purposes. Checking our go around page, you can quickly go through to make sure everything's good. 1,500 feet's fine. Approach, this is all good to go. Like I said, we're in the middle of descent mode, and our next constraint is 3,000 feet. So we have quite a bit to go here. What I like to do now with this aircraft, and pretty much any airliners or anything like that, is a quick double check to make sure my terrain is enabled, and I like to run through my settings real fast, just to make sure there's nothing that shouldn't be there, like kind of get like pieces like that. So what we can do is we can run down here. I assume my engines are already pre-configured. Everything is going pretty smooth for there. Pressurization system, things you want to check is to make sure you are slowly repressurizing the cabin, and you can see we've got it pretty smooth. If we needed to make an adjustment to that, there's actually a knob right above your head that you can kind of change that as well. That's looking perfectly fine. And you can see we're pretty darn close to our destination here. And like I said, we're basically going to go right to Dumba, take a left, and put this thing down on the ground. And it is quite a process getting this thing on the ground. You'll see what I mean when we get there. There's our little 10,000 foot position right there. We've also crossed 18,000 feet, so it's a good time to go ahead and switch out our barometric pressure. We're going to set that back to inch HG. I'm going to go ahead and push it like that. And you can go ahead and dial it in, whatever it is locally. 3007 is correct. And you can see our little QNH value down here is also set correctly. That's exactly what we want it to do. This is pretty good to go. Baro ref is now set. I can mark the checklist as complete. Of course, we can go ahead to the landing checklist as well. Proceed to next checklist. There we go. Landing, very, very easy. Seatbelts, landing gear, ground spoilers, and flaps. None of this were ready. We can take care of seatbelts right out of the way, and then we're waiting on landing gear. And it's basically going to be the next thing that we have to worry about as far as that operation goes. Now, let's go ahead and skip a little bit to 10,000 feet. All right, that's about 10,240 feet right there. And what we're doing now is we're basically decelerating. One of the problems that we face, because we're such a big airplane and we're so darn heavy, is we're going to have to slow down before we cross the 10,000 foot mark because we could be naughty speeds of 250 knots pretty much. We can't go past that under 10 grand. So I'm going to come up here and get my landing lights all kind of configured. That's basically as much as that needs to be. I guess technically we're supposed to have our logo light on, but it doesn't work yet. We can go ahead and ding these guys real quickly if we needed to, kind of giving everybody a heads up. Normally, of course, the cabin crew would be giving us a call in a minute, just letting us know, hey, the cabins are getting ready for landing. They'd be running around right now and collecting, anything that you left behind. And one of the cool things is if you look way in the distance, our airport destination is actually right over there. So we're just going to confirm that we're in terrain mode, which we are. It looks pretty good to me. We're about 9,000. We've slowed down substantially. Everything's been pre-programmed as far as that stuff goes. I'm just going through, doing my idiot checks here. This looks good to me. This looks good to me. Keep in mind, the real world, air traffic control is going to be bossing you around everywhere you go. So the fact that we're kind of almost freestyling this flight is just weird. And of course, we could be using the air traffic control that's built into, like you're saying, tensions, or we could be using IVAL, or we could use VATSIM or something like that, depending, of course, on who you want to be with. And all that is supported on this airplane, which I just think is awesome. So we're coming up on our first main position here, which is Dumba, D-U-M-B-A there. Delta Uniform Mike Bravo Alpha. We're supposed to be 16.1 nautical miles away from the ILS. Of course, you can see it's 111.7. Now, one of the cool things is you can actually push this knob here. And what that will do is that will turn on your current selected VOR. And you can see here it's actually selected Sierra Juliet Charlie as our VOR. We can actually dial that in to force it to be SFO if we wanted. So if I come down here and say Navade, you can see right now it's SJC. I don't want that. You can click here and hit SFO and press enter, and it'll actually look up the frequency for you. And the reason that's awesome is because, like I showed you, you actually have the actual frequency there. Press my enter key here. Nice, delightful. And you can see right now that SFO, we're about 29 nautical miles away, which checks out. Remember, we're supposed to be hitting about 16 when you cross Dumba. So that's just a quick little way to check that as well. Sort of like one of those little idiot moments here. We'll go ahead and get you right at Dumba. All right, we're just about there. And you can see we're taking our left turn. There's the runways right over there in the distance. Of course, it feels really scandalous being on the West Coast. Like, I don't do the West Coast thing very often, so this just feels weird. So one of the things we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get our approach ready to go. So everything's pretty much set. All we have to do is select our approach mode. And now the other thing we like to do is hit LS. And what that will do is that'll basically fire up our localizer as well as our glide slope displays. The other thing we want to double check real fast too is see what it says across the top. We can see the brake 3 is selected. We have descent ready, glide slopes ready, localizer is captured. We're on 1. We have a radar altimeter set of 200 feet. We're on auto thrust, autopilot 1. One of the cool things you could do is you can actually hit that button over there, and you can swing on dual autopilot mode. Now, one of the things you're going to notice here is as we start kind of settling down is you're going to start slowing down substantially. Basically, it's sort of reminding you that there's other things you need to be doing right now. Now, as it stands, we're pretty darn far away. You can see we're about 12 nautical miles away. You can actually see the end of the runway is about 13.4 nautical miles away as we're starting to settle in. Again, I can look out the runway and see it pretty clearly. You've got to remember, you are a big airplane. You take longer to speed up and slow down. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start dirting up the plane. So I'm going to go ahead and click in a couple notches of flaps. We're going to get some angry warnings. I'm going to go ahead and rip through real quickly here. Looks good to me, looks good to me, looks good to me. The plane's going to go ahead and get a little dirty. That looks good, looks good. We're going to go ahead and arm the spoilers, pull them out, just like that. And basically what we're waiting for is we're waiting for us to get a little bit closer to the point where we can actually start kind of that last little component of our descent. So normally what you do if you're like in a 737 or something is when you get that first diamond right here is you go ahead and throw down the gear. I'm going to hold off on that for just a moment here. All right, looks good to me. Comes in flaps 3, gear down. And again, you want to try to keep this configuration changes one at a time. So before we start descending, I want to make sure I'm in a pretty good position. And again, it's looking for that last click of flaps. Click it to the full position. What you're going to see is all sorts of fun warnings. There's my slats. There's my flaps. We're going to confirm the landing gear is down. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green lights to say that my light gear is down. Our selected speed is selected. Glide slope. It's telling me things in my ear now. There's my 2500. 2500. There's my localizer select. Looks good. 28 right. Everything's looking delightful. Let's go ahead and now look out the window. I gotta love these automatic airplanes. Now, one of the things I learned in playing around with this aircraft is when you try to land things manually, it's involved. And the reason it's involved is not because it's like, a very difficult plane to fly or anything like that. The reason it's involved is you have so much inertia that little changes that you're used to if you're flying like a 7.3 or even a 7.5, you're not going to get that response right away. Like you're going to tug on everything and it's going to be looking at you funny. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, is this what you meant? Now, one of the things you'll notice here is we're about to come up on our altitude constraints. Now, but if you remember, we're in localizer and glide slope mode, so it's going to disregard this. But what we want to do is we want to cross below it, and then we want to go get ourselves set up for our go-around, our missed approach procedure on this particular one. Sort of one of those things. Now, the missed approach procedure for us has us climbing to 3,000 feet. Now, if you're not sure what I'm referring to here, let me go ahead and open this one up real quick so you can see. So you can see here, we're coming down here. We're basically about to cross this point in our missed approach, 3,000 feet, SFO radial 281. That's important for us because we can dial that in pretty much right away because we are on approach mode. So I'm going to come over here. I'm actually going to dial in 3,000 feet. So if something bad happens on my approach here, I can just quickly go bang and slam that in. Basically, hit the go around button and go around. I'm not sitting here panicking, trying to figure out what my altitudes are. You never know if some newbie on like I don't know, a Cessna 172 or something decides to try to land on this runway in front of us or something. Like, not that you would ever want to get in the way of this thing. But hey, what am I to say kind of a thing. All right, looking good. You can see we've got ourselves established. I get a little bit of autopilot jitters there, but I've never known an autopilot that doesn't have a little bit of autopilot jitters. It's part of the fun. Okay, here we go. Landing. Landing gear down. Grand spoilers are armed. Flaps are in the armed position. Mark item is complete. Isn't that awesome? Mark checklist is complete. Super. So now, you saw me do it. You saw me do it. Okay, that's fine. And we're just going to look out the window here, confirm everything looks good. I got my hand on the controls. If you're going, just got interrupted by 1,000. If you are going to interrupt everything and do this last part of your landing by hand, one of the things you just have to remember is that you don't do it. I mean, ideally 200 is like kind of the decision altitude, but because it takes so much time to basically get yourself settled, you really want to go ahead and pull that hand to go ahead and start the landing procedure yourself at about 500. You need that extra 300 feet basically just to get the plane under control. But again, for this one, we're just going to do an automatic landing to make it nice and easy for us. Check, check. Chickadee check, chickadee check. I got my hand on the controls. My hand is on the autopilot kick out button. Again, at a moment's notice, I can jam the throttle into toga, immediately override everything, and get us in a nice safe climb out of here if something goes wrong. Hands are on the controls. Just relax. Oh, look at this. Pretty view, pretty view, pretty view. I'm so annoying to myself sometimes. Again, if you wanted to do a manual, you should already have shut off the autopilot. Now you'll notice my autopilot mode is land. Get your hand on the throttle. It's going to yell at you in a second. And on the throttle, get your feet on. Yep, we're good to go. Landing. Oh, look at those beautiful bars there. Okay, this is the weird part. Listen carefully.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10, retard.
And we're down. Full reverse. Delightful. Nice. Welcome to San Francisco.
Auto brake off.
Okay, I get that. Blip, 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 blip. If you're wondering why the aircraft oscillated a bit along the length, is basically if when you're landing this one, you have to just be mindful that you're trying not to fight it too much there. Okay, let's go ahead and get ourselves to the next spot. Everything's set. I did have to press and hold the reverse button. I will say for the record, man, that is a last second flare on this thing. Like, you do not have time to think. All right, let's clean up the plane. We're going to get all our flaps up. We're going to get all our landing gear up. Well, don't do that. You'd end up flat on the runway. It'd be pretty embarrassing. Of course, if you had your first officer, they'd be busy hitting switches for you, kind of clearing that off. And whoo, just look at the size of this plane. This thing is absurd. And we'll go ahead and pop it right there. Excellent. So hopefully this encourages you to check this aircraft out. This aircraft is free as of today. This is early November of 2024. At some point, they're probably going to offer something for it. I think it's wild. I haven't tried it in VR yet, so definitely something I'd want to do. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'll take care of that while we're parked here. Okay, are you happy? All right, we're happy. So pretty cool airplane. I definitely enjoy it. It's very easy to fly. The landing is a little weird. Like, it doesn't glide like a 7.4 does. It kind of has this, like, sort of cuts out at you at the last second. I don't know. It doesn't feel intuitive to me, but that's just part of the fun. Enjoy.